The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, during the week postponed the governorship and state houses of assembly elections by 1 week. Now, the elections earlier scheduled for Saturday, March 11, that's today, will now hold on Saturday, March 18. The commission said. The statement said the postponement was to make room for adequate timing to reconfigure the bimodal voter accreditation system BVAS machines ahead of the elections. The Presidential Election Tribunal had restrained the commission from tampering with all sensitive materials, including the BVAS machine used in the conduct of the presidential election, following the request by the candidates of the People's Democratic Party and the Labour Party. Now, the court also granted the President-elect Bola Tinubu's request to inspect election materials. This is as different protests took place in Abuja for and against the February 25 presidential election outcome, including the one led by the PDP leadership and its candidate Atiku Abubakar. Well, joining me in the studio to review all of these stories is Professor Jideofor Adibe, who is a lecturer of political science and international relations at the Nasarawa State University, Kefi, and also here with us is Olumide Braithwaite, who is a lawyer and spokesman of the Independent Campaign Council and APC Group. All right, gentlemen. So good to have all of you. And I start with you, Prof.
Yeah, thank you, Sambo.
Yes, let's review all of this. The postponement of the election, which is supposed to have been held today, is the big one. You would have seen all the court cases that came through. And then, of course, the Court of Appeal granting, INEC that a request for its application, and then the latest one, which you are hearing, that the Labour Party is complaining that INEC has refused to allow Peter Obi to access the presidential election materials, and then Bola Ahmed Tinubu on the other part was granted access by the court to inspect the election materials. The PDP too is also saying that, look, INEC hasn't given the opportunity to inspect the election materials. What do you make of all of this?
Well, the independence of INEC is highly contested at this time. There are a couple of things that it ought to have done differently, and which lent to suspicions of partiality or bias. For example, appointing MC Oluomo, who was to be able to help in carrying sensitive election materials when everyone knows he's so very close to Bola Tinubu. And then
although the courts later struck,
yes, it was. Why did they have to wait for Labour Party to go and fight for others to go to court to get an injunction? I think that shouldn't have happened, because you also have to be sensitive to optics. Besides that, there was also the case of Olusegun Agbeje as a resident electoral commissioner for Lagos. There were a series of complaints. What would it have cost INEC to simply reassign him? And then,
just like he did in Sokoto.
Yeah, that's what I seen. And there were also other issues. For example, that the man in charge of ICT in INEC, Jideofor, and who played a pivotal role in the development of the BVAS and the card reader, was suddenly transferred to Enugu as an administrative personnel. That's maybe internet rumor. We also had another
administrative secretary. Actually, which is actually a very big position, because after the resident electoral commissioner, that is the next person in all of the
rumor around it. The rumor around it, which maybe the investigative journalists should look into, is it true that it has to do with compromising the technology behind the beavers?
I'm sorry to just chip in here. I mean, when INEC actually did that, I remember there was a forum that INEC held with senior journalists. Myself, I was involved. Okay. And we asked that question, if indeed it wasn't because of this sort of controversy ahead, that he was, reassigned to and then given another position. But INEC denied all of that, saying that as a senior person, he was a director, then that he can be promoted or be reassigned to any other office. Just to make the
this is something investigative journalist, because now INEC has said several things that it didn't really carry out. There was also another rumor. I say rumor because, to the best of my knowledge, it's not been proven, that the current ICT director of ICT was a commissioner in Lagos State. These are some of the rumors that have coupled with its performance in the last presidential and National Assembly elections. It has really raised a big question about the impartiality of the electoral umpire.
All right, and I come to you, Tunji Braithwaite. You are very close to the APC. You've had this independent campaign council for the presidential candidate. And then, of course, as a lawyer, what do you have to say without touching the issues that are in court, but generally all these controversies, the protests by the PDP during the week, and even the APC too also had some supporters who were protesting at INEC in support of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. What do you say of all of this?
Thank you very much, Sumner. Thank you, Professor. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to start by thanking Nigerians, those that voted, for coming out to vote, even in the face of severe constraints that we all know about. We're still not out of the dark there. Secondly, I'd like to also state on record that these elections, notwithstanding the controversies that are going on, are by far the most credible, the freest and fairest elections we've had in this country.
There are a lot of people who dispute that with you,
yes,
especially the parties that are in court.
Yes, that is, we are going through the normal right of access, if you like, the various litigations, the various processes. This is an unfolding democracy, and by far it's not perfect. We are not perfect, and I dare say that the future for Nigeria, I would say, is very bright, because now we have a political landscape that has changed irretrievably. The ascension, if you like, of the Obedience and the Labour Party, which essentially gave birth to this, what I would call new democracy, whereby the two political parties...
a new democracy or a new political order, so to say?
I will take that.
Yeah.
And a new trajectory, absolutely. And I think that in as much as you have on both sides, it's a welcome development, because it means that the proportion of the population, the youths primarily, have a voice, and they're doing that. But I'm aware of all the actions going on in court, and it's quite normal for you to challenge. But I also think it's important for us not to lose sight of where we are. We have conducted the presidential elections. Because of some constraints with INEC, we have to postpone them by a week, and that gives all parties an even playing ground to put their put their houses
APC said
in
as much
order.
as it's painful for it, it nonetheless has to accept INEC's decision. But I want to take you back to the Nigeria Advanced Party, which is your late father's party, the late Tunji Braithwaite, who was the serial presidential contender. Do you think that if Tunji Braithwaite had participated in this election, he wouldn't have gone to court, just like other political parties are going to court to dispute this election, because you have said this was free and fair? And I know that your father, when he used to contest, usually ends up, going to court or, joining forces with others to contest against results that seem very controversial.
Cockroaches and mosquitoes.
Yeah, I mean, that was a famous. Yeah. So talk to us about that.
Thank
actually.
you very much. Thank you. Most certainly, your recourse to the courts is your right. It's your constitutional right, and where you have instances of where you are aggrieved, you have to do that, and that is why I said in my opening statement that the PDP and the other parties that feel aggrieved, they're doing the right things. But in as much as they're doing so, we have to also be conscious of the larger picture, which is where we are going in the future. And I can state that the administration that is now coming on board with President-elect Bola Tinubu will be a participatory one. Which will...
Are you thinking of forming a government of national unity?
No, certainly not a government of national unity, but
all right.
The presidency of this country was zoned to the south. And both Peter Obi, the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, and the president-elect, Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, are both southerners. We mustn't lose sight of this, that something was achieved through this electoral process, and that was a successful power shift that was negotiated from the north to the south.
All right, Prof. So he has brought a wonderful dimension to it, I mean, which is what a lot of political analysts have been saying too, that the South too should actually look at this election from a different perspective. Wouldn't it have been worse off if a northerner had won the election? But well, in the midst of all of this, he is also talking about the need for reconciliation and all of that. Do you think that the president-elect himself has done much to be able to, you know, galvanize a lot of people, even from other political parties, to see things from a different perspective, especially those from the South? We have thought that he will do exactly what he did after the APC primaries by visiting some of the contestants in their homes, one by one, like Amechi or Sibanjo, but we didn't see that happening at the general election. Don't you think Tinubu himself is not doing enough to actually, you know, warm the hearts of his fellow contenders?
First of all, let me commend my brother here for knowing declaring that the elections were free and fair, even before the courts have taken the final decision. Before, I was discussing with him that when I was in secondary school, I read about the father's doctoral dissertation on the jurisprudence of the oracle. That sounded big, so that's what exactly has done now. Yeah. Anyway, I feel, for example, that Tinubu is more of an opposition politician, most of his political life, apart from the time he was governor. So his form of politics has always been adversarial, and you can see it in his speech forms. He did say after winning that he was going to, his acceptance speech was reconciliatory and devoid of the jabs people know him for, except the one he threw at Dino Melai.
Yeah, I mean, which a lot of people then really.
So, but he also said he was going to set up a committee, a reconciliation committee, but then the others have gone to court. So, and it is a normal process, as he said, which will actually enrich our jurisprudence.
Absolutely.
So nobody knows if, if he's privately in contact with them. P2B, for example, has said he had no problem talking to him, and but it will not stop him from going to court, which is better than allowing, if they didn't go to court, because going to court actually gives the supporters the hope that it is not over until it's over. So if people who were planning a street protest will be restrained and would like to wait and see the outcome. And as you know, time is a healer of wounds. The more we distance ourselves, the longer we distance ourselves from the event, the less the inclination for people to take
but we saw PDP that has gone to court, still going ahead to protest on the streets.
That's a
what will you say about
that? That's not the kind of
protest
that would have happened if they didn't go to court. So that going to court is just like a government setting up a committee when something happens. Sometimes it's to manage emotions and frustrations. So that has happened, and we have to wait. What will happen is the INEC, I read both PDP and Labour Party, they are complaining of not being given access. And that accentuates the perception, the belief in some quarters that something has gone terribly wrong with INEC. I'm also very disappointed that the president that has always said he wanted to be remembered for, the way he has helped to broaden and deepen our democracy, he didn't even show any indignation at what happened. At least we have condemned. Nobody was even talking of resignation or even issuing a public query of why certain things happened. For example,
isn't INEC supposed to be independent? What should the executive be doing?
Independent doesn't mean
if it asks some INEC commissioners or the national chairman to
you're not
resign.
funding yourself. Independence, you're still operating within a particular government. If the elections were very successful, it would be a credit to the president. The buck stops on his table. So one would have expected some form of anger at what happened, and that will, rhyme with the expectation, the trust. People believe that, okay, having signed the Electoral Act, this man is really serious about leaving a legacy in terms of elections.
All right, I'll just have to stop you there, Prof, so that we'll go on a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue this before we conclude. Well, we'll be talking about, setting the agenda for INEC ahead of the March 18 governorship elections, and of course, how to ensure that Nigerians have trust in the electoral system when we come back from this break. Stay with us. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching This Week, which is a review of the big stories during the week. And of course, we've been taking a look at INEC's conduct of the elections and the shift of the second election, which is supposed to have been held on Saturday, which is today. And of course, it's now been postponed till March 18th. And of course, I still have with me Professor Jideofor Adibe, who is of the Political Science and International Relations Department of the Nasarawa State University. And then, of course, we have Olumide Braithwaite, who is a lawyer and spokesperson of the Independent Campaign Council. He's also the son of former serial presidential contender, the later Tunji Braithwaite, who was a lawyer too. And so I come to you, Braithwaite. Let's talk about the elections ahead and the preparations by political parties. Do you think that there's still a lot of trust in INEC as we head to March 18? Because some people say that with this postponement it has eroded some of the trust a lot of Nigerians have on INEC.
It's a very, very good question, Sumner. I feel that with everything that's happening, there may be even more voter apathy. In other words, we might see a decrease in the numbers that would come out next weekend. That is probably a combination of a number of factors, including what you've alluded to as to INEC's perception. On the other hand, it could have a converse effect and actually bring out more people who were registered to vote and who didn't vote in the presidential to come out to cast their votes for the governorship and state house.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see.
All right, Prof. These elections are very local. I mean, the state houses of assembly and the governorship, they are much more personal and closer to the constituents at the various states of the federation. Now, talk to us about if this can ginger a lot of people to want to come out to participate more than they did with that of the National Assembly and presidential election, because maybe those ones are distant from them. I mean, you know how politicians do. Once they win elections and come to Abuja, they don't touch base with home. But these ones, the governors and the state houses of assembly members, they live with them.
Well, you're right. There are a number of factors that will influence voter turnout. If you have a horse in the race, if one of the candidates is somebody you're supporting and you're emotionally attached to the candidacy, the chances of your coming out will be high. If you have faith in INEC as an umpire and believe that your vote will count, the chances of your coming out will be high. There are other non-ballot factors like security and the rest. But one of the things I believe that we can learn from what happened last Saturday will be that we should bring back the conversation of should we at this time unbundle INEC? Because constantly it has...
And when you say unbundling, what do you mean?
For example, break it down so that you have a unit, for example, responsible for logistics, because constantly it has issues of logistics. Or, personally, I would also want us to have a second look at having former vice chancellors and professors. I have a lot of respect for my colleagues. My colleagues.
Many people have been hitting you hard that you're supporting politicians.
No, I'm not supporting, but what I'm trying to say is we have then to ask the question, being the vice chancellor in a university, is it enough experience? or do we look for the Lumelus, those who have managed complex projects, like, you know, are we likely to get better out of them? Beg them. And
you think that will not, you know, bring a further conversation as to whether they won't be partisan? Because I mean, businessmen.
Well, it's not being business. Professors, are they not part of Nigerian society?
They are, but at least I mean, like when Jega introduced them from 2011, the thinking was the academics, at least they have a broader perspective and all of that.
Partisanship. In fact, he was accused of having met some people there. I'm sure even if they choose you and you are sleeping in your room throughout, some people will still say that they saw you meeting some candidates. So I'm talking about professionalism, and it's vice chancellors are highly talented, and I agree that relatively professors do have high integrity, but in terms of managing complex organizations like INEC, if you take somebody like this Glow man, people who have managed business with different branches across the country.
How about using logistics companies?
That's be part of the unbundling, if we don't want the option of really looking for, you know, getting away from this professorate class, with all due respect.
Well, you're part of your circles, and you know better. And Olumide, what do you have to say about that? I mean, the use of the professors and then the call for unbundling of INEC, and he's talking about logistics. INEC should actually have, there should be a separate logistics company or organization, so to say, not company, that handles all of these issues for elections. And then what do you also make about the calls for the resignation of Professor Mahmoud Yakubu by the PDP and some other political parties?
Let me take that last one first. So that's a ridiculous postulation, because we all know that the PDP are aggrieved, as well as other political parties. But let's look at where we are today in 2023. I remember as being a young boy, FEDECO.
The former Federal Electoral Commission.
Right. And when you talk about campaigning and elections, we've come a long way from there. Let's also not forget that technology is always developing. It's always on the move. The learned professor here talked about unbundling, and I think what he's talking about is really just dissecting different parts of INEC and maybe breaking them down to make them more professional and more workable for the future. And I'm confident, I have no doubts that these innovations will be incorporated, and it'll augur well for our developing democracy.
Do you think that the president-elect is willing to do that? I mean, probably present an executive bill before the National Assembly, or ask APC lawmakers or even other lawmakers to actually initiate this? Because we've seen the Electoral Offences Commission bill, which was meant to actually unbundle INEC to at least remove that aspect of prosecution and all of that, get installed at the National Assembly. So what do you have to say about that?
You need a strong personality at the center who will drive these policy moves. And if you look at the history or trajectory of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, our president-elect, you'll see that being replicated at the federal level. I'm quite confident that that will happen. But let me also add that notwithstanding all these controversies and what have you, I still stand that these elections, by far, of course you'll have isolated spots and conflicting reports from international observers, but we're all Nigerians, and we are still intact as a nation. And for me, that's a pass mark for INEC.
Well, he's still insisting on that. I mean, despite what some Nigerians are saying, that, I mean, these elections have been very, very controversial, especially the issues of uploading of results as we head towards the elections for March 18. What do you have to say about how INEC should
promises? In fact, if you read the international press recently, you really get a good pulse of their feelings. And some of them try to use diplomatic language. But that's the things I said before. That lack of sense of indignation from the president is very surprising. And I actually support the fact that...
But what would you have expected President Buhari to do, Prof? I mean, he's not in charge of the Electoral Commission. And if he tries to do anything, the opposition may say that the government is trying to interfere with the elections.
All the observers, he is aware of the logistic challenges. He can still navigate around the issues without trying to be partisan. I think initially he wanted to balance this act of being a member of a party and at the same time somebody who wanted to leave a legacy in terms of
a president
conducting
and a
a free and fair election. There's this tension between being a party member or being a statesman. I think he was blackmailed into being overtly partisan. And I mean, some people even say that when he was blackmailed, he decided to close his eyes to whatever was happening in that maybe this internet rumor. But what I'm trying to say here is that if I were if I were Professor Mahmoud, we should set an example. You have performed below expectations. He did that also in 2019, but managed to redeem himself in the Oshun and Ekiti and Anambra elections, and that gave a lot of hope. He went to Chatham House, made these big promises, and the trust, the confidence of the people was based on the fact that you are going to upload almost in real time. So that, because it's not, you can't snatch ballot boxes now with Beaver's accreditation, but it's still manually, you photograph it, and therefore people can still alter it. By uploading electronically almost in real time, people develop confidence. You were able to do that for Senate, House of Rep. Suddenly you were not, and you are not able to do for president, and you didn't even give any explanation, as if you owe nobody any explanation.
Well, there was a preliminary statement where
that came out
that
3-4 days, some days later.
2 days.
I think
it was
my
own
opinion is that in Sena society, he shouldn't wait for anybody to ask him to resign.
So he should have resigned.
He should have resigned.
Okay, well, resigning in the midst of an election. I mean, we haven't seen that happening in Nigeria, but I mean, it will be a big call. But let's talk about some people. I mean, the APC, for example, has hit back at the PDP and Labour Party, saying that they are busy rejoicing about their senators elect and House of Reps members elect, and yet still saying that the election was poorly conducted. So how can you benefit from one and then kick against the other? I mean, Festus Keyamo, the spokesperson of the APC, had been saying that. What's your reaction?
What do you expect to say? For example, the fact that nobody is quarreling with Beaver. I think Beaver did part of his job, accreditation.
Which some CSOs scored it up to 98%.
Yes, the accreditation went well. The question now is that issue of uploading almost in real time, which means there is a tendency that you might have manipulated results. Nobody is sure, it's still a conjecture. Yeah. You might have manipulated results in some ways. So it's also not possible that you will manipulate in all 176,000, almost 177,000 polling units. So if by what you announced, I benefit, that doesn't mean that nobody is saying that it is a complete failure, but people were saying, let us see what the totality of what happened. Of course, my brother is right that it is part of our political history that all the losing parties will complain, even those ones we call briefcase parties.
Yeah, I mean,
they say they were rigged out.
And Prof. Olumide, I come back to you. I actually saw a video of the Second Republic being shared by some people. I think even on your platform, where you had then Nnamdi Azikiwe speaking on behalf of Obafemi Awolowo, Waziri Ibrahim, and all. During the 1979 election, this same scenario, they all came out and said, "Look, these elections were rigged." And then one person said, perfectly rigged or something like that, or super rigged or something like that. Let's talk about these sort of things. I mean, even your own dad used to contest elections, and then there was always that tendency for Tunji Braithwaite or Gani Fahimi to complain that they were rigged out of an electoral process, including the issues of the mosquitoes and cockroaches. That, we talked about that, the vote, some people will say cows and goats voted and all of that. How can we reform our electoral process to engender trust so that the winner of the election will at least enjoy the legitimacy of his office? Because there are fears now that Tinubu may be sworn in, but he may not likely enjoy the legitimacy of the presidential office.
I think that rhetoric is being spewed out by his political opponents. I made reference earlier to technology and where we're coming from the 1979 or 83 elections where our party, the Nigerian Advance Party, my late father, Tunji Braithwaite, contested it. And you cannot compare, you simply can't compare that era where ballot boxes were physically taken. I mean, you had evidences glaring for that. We've come a long way. And where you have a leader at the top who is progressive, like the President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I believe that he will set the wheels in motion with bills in the houses to consolidate the impartiality, the independence of the electoral umpire. But I again stand by what I said. These elections are by far the freest and fairest, notwithstanding the
challenges.
protests.
Okay, as we try to round off this conversation.
The social media space has been taken over by our youths, essentially, and they're controlling the rhetoric there. But quite apart from that, the legal processes and the institutions, the infrastructure that we have will go through their course. I'm confident, I'm optimistic that they will do the right thing.
So no issues of legitimacy, challenges?
Not at all, not at all.
Okay, just quickly before we round off this conversation, the last time we had a very controversial election like this, Prof, we had that in 2007, and the president-elect, when he was sworn in, admitted that there were errors. That's the late Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, and said, look, these elections were not perfectly rigged or super rigged, as the Second Republic politicians are called it. But look, I'm going to do something about that. And that was when we had the Justice Uwe's committee set up. What should be the things that the president-elect can do, if indeed he comes into power, to assuage the feelings and help reform the process so that there will be increased believability in electoral results announcement?
Yeah, campaigns are by nature very divisive. Some people call it war without bullets. So whoever emerges the president, after the court processes, will have a big job of trying to reconcile. And the good thing is that the three share more things in common than they have differences. The three are billionaires, they are free marketers, they are cosmopolitan. Each of the three, they are married outside their ethnic groups. Forget them. So,
and they'll be friends in one way or the other, especially Atiku and Tinubu.
They are married outside their ethnic group. And
Obi and Atiku are in the same party.
And the three are veterans in the use of court processes. Tinubu tried it, in fact, tried the ACN. Most of the governors got into through the court process.
Very quickly.
Both OP and then the same thing with Atiku. So they have more in common, and none of the three is a person known for violence. So whatever happens.
But what do we tell the supporters? Because some people are still saying that they are deferring the violence until after the court's judgment or so. What do we do to remove that from the minds of supporters?
The Supreme Court.
And by the time this is resolved, 3-4 months will have elapsed at the least.
At the least.
And emotions, the things, the longer the time, after a while, many people will start going to their
and then maybe probably with appointments. By the time the president elects your party leader actually makes appointments here and there, that may actually assuage the feelings of people. But do you subscribe very quickly to the issues of the government of national unity? Atiku had proposed that if he had won, he would have done that. Do you think Bola Tinubu is open to that?
Well, I want to cast back
very quickly.
Very quickly. In the second stanza of Bola Ahmed Tinubu's tenure as Lagos State Governor, he reached out to the Igbo community in Lagos by appointing an Igbo man as a commissioner.
For finance, Ben Akaboze, who's the DG of the budget office now,
who has since his trajectory to the federal, and I think you can attribute that to Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He is cosmopolitan, and he's a team manager, a bridge builder, and in that regard, I believe that we're going to see some surprises.
All right, some surprises ahead. It's left for Nigerians to actually judge his conduct when he's eventually sworn in. But peace is something we all must keep, because this country belongs to all of us. And as we allow the legal process to go through, we all beseech supporters of all the political parties to conduct themselves in a manner that's acceptable to all Nigerians. So we must thank you so much, Professor Jideofor, who is of the Department of Political Science and International Relations, Nasarawa State University. I can see them having a golden handshake here. And Olumide Braithwaite, who is a spokesman of the Independent Campaign Council, as affiliated to the APC, and of course he's a lawyer too. And then he happens to be the son of the late Tunji Braithwaite, who was a serial presidential contender. Thank you, gentlemen.